Let's take a look at the irregular preterites. So right now we have learned how to conjugate verbs in Spanish in the past tense, the simple past tense or the preterite tense. Now there are irregular preterites, and these are some of the most commonly used verbs in the Spanish language, so we need to learn these verbs. Okay, so the irregular preterites can be broken down into three classifications. It just makes it a little easier, okay? Um, the stems of these verbs, when you put them in the preterite tense, are irregular. And there are verbs that are called the U stem verb, because when you put them in the preterite tense, they have the U in the stem. There are also I stem verbs, so when you put these verbs in the preterite, they have an I in the stem. And finally, there's a few verbs that when you put them in the preterite or simple past tense, they have a J in the stem. So try to familiarize yourself with these verbs. And here are the most commonly used, some of the most commonly used irregular preterite verbs. And so the U stem ones are andar, to go about, estar, a very important verb, of course, the verb to be, poder, the verb to be able, the way we say I can, or in the past tense, I could, poner, to put or place, saber, to know, and tener, to have. Those are very common and readily used verbs, and we should be able to put those into the preterite tense. Let's look at the I stem verbs. Venir, to come, querer, to want. Okay, I wanted. Hacer, the verb to do or make, again, very common, important verb. And finally, dar, to give. And then let's look at a couple J stems. Traer, to bring, and a very commonly used verb. Decir, to say. So let's take a look at these. And here are their stems now. Andar, when you go to conjugate this verb, we need to get the stem. We don't get the stem by dropping the ending. We have to know these stems. So the stem for andar is anduv when you're going to conjugate it in the preterite. For estar, it's estuv. For poder, to be able to, it's pud. For poner, to put in place, is pus. To know, saber, is sup. And to have is tuv. You need to learn these stems to familiarize yourself with them. Let's look at the I stems. Venir is vin. Querer, the verb to want, quis. Hacer, to do or make, is is or is. In the third person singular, the L-ea form, it's an H-I-Z. And finally, for the verb to give is just a D, and then we'll put the endings on. Finally, let's look at our J stem verbs. Traer, to bring, is tra. There's an H at the end, and decir is dich. Okay, so you should be familiar with these verbs when you're going to put them into the preterite tense. You have to just memorize these stems. Okay, now the endings. What are the preterite endings? These endings are different than for the regular preterites, and again, you just have to learn these. So the irregular preterite endings are kind of a combination of AR and DR and IR regular preterite endings. So you just have to learn these. So what is the ending for in yo? It will be an E. Okay, that's the preterite ending. So you'll put that on the end of your irregular stem, and that will give you the yo form. Okay, what about tu? It will be iste. What about él, ella, usted? It'll be just an O. What about nosotros? It will be imos, I-M-O-S. And what about the ellos form? It will be ieron, i.e. ieron. Now, we had two J stem verbs. when you use the eos form, the ending will not be ieron, but it will be eron. Okay, don't worry so much about that. So let's take a look at some more information here. Now, in addition to the I stem, U stem, and J stem verbs, there's a couple more verbs that are irregular in the preterite tense. And again, these are very commonly used verbs. Ser, the verb to be, the other verb to be, and ir, the verb to go. Now, what is kind of ironic here or a little confusing for maybe the English speaker is that the verb ser, the verb to be, and the verb ir, to go, when you put them in the preterite tense, they conjugate exactly the same. So then you might ask, well, if they conjugate the same way in the past, how will you know if you're saying I was, or they were, or I went? And again, you tell from context, just by the context of what the person's saying or what's being written. But let's quickly go through the conjugation in the preterite of both these verbs. So for ser, yo fui, I was. Tú fuiste, you were. Él fue, he was. Nosotros fuimos, we were. And ellos fueron, they were. Now, look at the verb ir, to go. It conjugates the same way in Spanish. Yo fui can also mean I went. Tú fuiste, you went. Él fue, he went. Nosotros fuimos, we went. And ellos fueron, they went. And again, you tell by context when you're reading or listening. You can tell when you hear ser or ir in the preterite tense, even though they conjugate exactly the same, you could tell by context which form you're using. So let's look at this question here. It says in number 1, ¿A dónde fuiste? Donde, well, donde we use with ir. So where did you go? Okay, so we know it's go. ¿Cómo fue la comida? So now we're using como in the verb ser. ¿Cómo es él? ¿Cómo es ella? What are they like? Now it's the verb to be. ¿Cómo fue la comida? What was the food like? What was the meal like? And then look at 3. ¿Dónde fue la liquidación? Or we could say, ¿Dónde fue la clase? Now we're using ser. Where was the class? Okay, we didn't use a dónde, we used dónde. So we know it's not ir, it's got to be ser. Let's look at a few more examples here. Let's look at this sentence in English. The shoes were cheap. Okay, so we're going to use ser here. So los zapatos fueron baratos. Number 2, who went to the store, it should read. So now we want ir. So ¿quién fue a la tienda? 3, how was the clothing, or what was the clothing like? You want someone to describe it, so you're going to be using ser. ¿Cómo fue la ropa? And then, did you go shopping? Remember, ir de compras is the phrase we use to go shopping. So, did you go shopping? So, fuiste de compras? Okay, let's move on. Let's look at the irregular preterites and try and do some conjugations. Again, there are I stem, U stem, and J stem. Okay, so you have to memorize the stem, and then the endings are very unique for these. And so you need to spend a little time getting used to them. But let's take a look at this reading and see if we can do these. So the first line says, La tienda Belk tener ropa en liquidación. So we want to say that Belk's, or the store Belk, and we want to put the verb tener in the preterite tense, okay? So that we want to say that Belk's had ropa en liquidación. It had clothing on sale. or in liquidation. So how are we going to say had? Well, what is the preterite stem for tener? It's a U stem. It's going to be tuv, T-U-V. What is the ending that goes with the third person singular, el, ella, or it? It's an O, so tuvo, tuvo. Okay, so the Belks had clothing in liquidation. Let's look at the next sentence. María estar muy contenta. We want to say that Maria was very happy. Okay, so again, we want the preterite tense. Okay, so I have to remember the stem. It's estar is a U stem verb, so the stem will be estuv, and what ending goes with ella? It's an O, so estuvo. And then we have ella traer. Traer is a J stem verb. It means to bring. So we want to say she brought sus hijos a la tienda. She brought her children to the store. So traer is a J stem, so it's tra, and ella trajo. The ending is an O. Let's look at the next sentence. Ellos venir a la tienda. We want to say they came to the store. And then in the next sentence, Bob no querer venir. Bob did not want to come. So let's take a look at ellos and venir. They came. Well, what is the stem of venir, the verb to come? Okay, it's an I stem verb, so it's vin. And what is the ending that goes with ellos? Ieron. Ellos vinieron. You have to memorize these. And now we want to say su hijo Bob no quiso, did not want to go. So what is the stem of querer? It's an I stem. It's quis, and the ending is o. Okay, o is the ending that goes with the el, ella form of the verb. All right. And they did the next one for us, but let's take a look. So Bob no quiso venir a la tienda. He didn't want to go to the store, pero eventualmente, but eventually, el ponerse. Now, ponerse is to become or to get, and it's the verb poner with se, which is the reflexive use of poner. So let's just look at poner. What is the stem of poner in the preterite tense? It's a U stem. It's pus. What ending goes with el? It's an O. So él se puso. He put on una camisa en rebaja. He put on a shirt that was en rebaja, on sale. All right. Su hija Betty poder comprar un vestido. So we want to say what? His daughter Betty poder, could, comprar, buy, un vestido, could buy a dress. So we've got the verb poder. What is the preterite stem? Again, we have to memorize this. It's a U stem verb. It's going to be pud. And what ending goes with Betty? Ella, it will be an O. Ella pudo comprar un vestido. She could buy a dress. De cuadros is checkered. Su amiga Ana también venir a la tienda. So we want to say her friend Anna also came to the store. Venir a la tienda. Ella ir a buscar más ropa. She ir a buscar. She went. Ir is to go, to look for more clothing. So let's go back. Su amiga Ana también venir a la tienda. What is the stem of venir, the verb to come? It's a U stem. I'm sorry, it's an I stem verb. It's going to be vin. Okay, and then the ending that goes with Ana or ella is an O. Ella vino. She came to the store. And then she went. Ella fue a buscar a Betty. Okay. And then here, the next line, we have the verb andar. Okay, to go about. Andar por la tienda cuando saber que. Okay, saber means to know or find out, we want to put these in the past tense. So, ella andar, she went about the store when she found out. So let's go and conjugate these verbs. Andar is a U stem, so it's going to be anduv. Ella takes an O ending. Ella anduvo por la tienda cuando ella. Now we have the verb saber. It's also a U stem. The stem for saber, and you have to memorize these in the preterite, is soup. Cuando ella supo, and the ending is an O that goes with ella in the preterite. Finally, let's look at these last examples here, these last couple sentences. Ella ir enseguida. So we want to say she went. Ir is the verb to go. So she went. Enseguida means right away. And she dar zapatos, and she gave shoes to Betty. And then we have Betty decir, Betty said. So we've got to take the verb ir, the verb dar, and the verb decir, and put those all in the preterite. First of all, ir is just an irregular verb, again in the preterite, so ella fue. Please know how to conjugate the verb ir and ser in the preterite tense. Ella fue enseguida, she went right away, and she gave, it's dio. Remember, the stem of dar in the preterite is just a D, and the ending is an IO, and dio, zapatos a Betty. And then Betty dijo, all right, decir is a J stem verb, dijo, and the ending for Betty or ella is an O in the preterite. And she said what? Que los zapatos ser una ganga. She said that the shoes ser una ganga were a bargain. Okay? And so the shoes were, how do we say were? It's the eos form. Fueron una ganga. So please take a look at the I stem, U stem, and J stem verbs. Remember, you have to memorize those stems, and it's pretty easy. Once you get those memorized, then you need to put on the correct endings. And of course, the subject pronoun determines what the ending will be. Spend a little time, do a few of these, and you should be able to master this pretty easily. Thank you.